So today what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on converting, namely working with percent. Okay, so our goal today is I can solve missing information related to percent questions. Now there are three types of questions that you're going to have to be able to do. Okay, so one is to find the percentage of a number, find the numerator value, and finally finding the denominator value. So our percents, in many cases, we're going to set them up as fractions and we're going to be solving that way. So one thing that we have to always remember, and this was probably drilled into you a long time ago as well, that percent is always out of 100. So out of 100 means divided by 100. Okay, so let's take a look at the types of examples. Okay, so the three different types of questions that we have to solve are written and asked in different ways. So let's take a look at the first one. Okay, so the first one says, determine the following. And they're asking, what percent is 45 of 70? So what we're after is we're after a percent. Okay, so that's what we want to find. Okay, something out of 100. And we have what percent is 45, and the 70 is related to the total, which would be the 100%. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do it. I'm going to show you one way and then I'll show you another way. That's why there's a line across here so that you can see that there are more than one way to do it. So when we're looking at this, I want to know, what do I have to multiply 70 by to get 100? Okay, so what do I have to multiply 70 by to get 100? Because then I know what I need to multiply 45 by in order to figure out this question mark. Now, I don't just know off by hand 70 times what equals 100, so I can use a reverse operation. So 70 times a number equals 100. Well, what about 100 divided by 70? And if I do that, then I know what 70 would need to be multiplied by in order to get 100. And when you do that, you end up with 1.43. So I know then here what I need to do is I need to multiply my 45 by that same number. So 45 times 1.43, and I actually get then for my answer 64%. Now that is one way. And an easier way would be to take the 45, divide it by 70, and then multiply it by 100. And so some of you, depending on the type of calculator you have, it will do that for you. So 45 divided by 70 times 100, and again, you will get 74%. Now, obviously, if I look at the two different ways to do it, this way is a lot faster. Okay, so I take the number, divide it by what it's out of, and then multiply by 100. So let's do another question that's similar to that. Okay, now this one we'll set it up this way. However, I think it's, as I said, this is much faster and easier to do it, so we're going to probably do it that way. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, so I have 64 of 120. Okay, and the 120 relates to 100%. So I want to know what that would be. So what we need to do is we can follow the same method as the second one over here. And so we would go 64 divided by 120 times 100. And when we do that, we end up with 53.3%. Okay, so what you would do is you literally would take your calculator and type this in. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring up my calculator and have this here for us. And you can see it's just 64 divided by 120 times 100. Okay, and you can see that's exactly what I typed in, and out comes 53.3 repeating. Okay, so one decimal place for our percents. Okay, so let's go on to the next type of question. Now, in this next type of question, it says determine the following. What is 35% of 90? So this time I do know what the percent is. Okay, so I know it's 35. percent. And remember, percent is always out of 100. So the first thing that I would do is I would actually take my 35 over 100. So what is 35% of 90? So in other words, I don't know what 35% is. The 35 is on the top, so that means my 35, my question mark, has to be on the top as well. So I need to find what number would be 35% of 90. Now, just like the previous question, when it's set up here, it's a little bit different again. I can't just divide and multiply by 100. It's not going to work that way this time because this time I'm finding this numerator that is not a percentage. So one thing I can do again is I'm interested in what do I multiply, sorry about that, what do I multiply my 100 by in order to get 90. And that should actually be fairly easy to figure out. But if you're unsure about it, what you can do is you actually can take your calculator and do it the opposite way. Okay, so here's our calculator. So I want to know, what do I multiply by? Now, some of you might see that right away, what it needs to be, um, because when you're dividing by 100, you actually are just moving the decimal place over. But let's take a look at it. So I want to know, what do I multiply 100 by to get 90? So that means if I go 90 and divide by 100, that will tell me the number that I need. And if you notice when you do that, you get decimal 9. So decimal 9 is the number that I'm after. So that means in order to find this top value, all I need to do then is take it and multiply it by 0.9. And when we do that, we end up having 31.5. Now it's not 31.5%, it's just 31.5. So that's my answer. Now, just like the previous examples had a different way you can do it, you can actually do another method called cross multiplying. Cross multiplying means I'm still starting with the exact same thing that I had before, except this time I'm still finding the same thing as well, but I'm going to put an X here just so we have. Cross multiplying means I multiply things directly across the equal sign. And if I do that here, I'd have 100 times X, and that then should equal the 35 times 90. Okay, now I'm not interested in 100x, I'm only interested in 1x. So what I would do next is I would actually then divide both sides by 100. And when I do that, oops, there it is. It's hiding behind something. When I do that, what I end up with is x by itself, 35 times 90 divided by 100. And just to show you that that will give us the same answer, we'll pull up the calculator again. So we have 35 times 90 divided by 100, and we end up with the 31.5 again. Okay, and again, remember, it's not percent. So let's do the next one. Now, I'll be honest with you, these two methods, both of them are mathematically valid, so you can choose which one you prefer. I find that this first method works for everything. This method also works with cross multiplying and then dividing. But if you find that that's too complicated, then maybe just keep doing the same kind of process here. So the same type of question, what is 115% of 60? So I know the percent's out of 100, so I need to do that. So it's out of that. Now what I need to do is, what am I going to put, where's the 60 go? What is 115% of 60? So 60 goes in the same position as the 100 does, and I want to find the value of x. So the same kind of thing here is I need to know, and if you notice I already have the answer there, I need to know, what do I multiply 100 by to get 60? And if you notice, it's 0.6. So that means in order to find x, I take the 115 and also multiply it by 0.6. When we do that, what we end up having for our answer is 69. Now, does that make sense? 69 is larger than 60. It should make sense because we're talking about 115%. So the number has to be larger than 100, larger than the 100 part. So the 60 is like the 100 part. So the number for x needs to be larger than 60. All right, so then I would just put therefore 69. So everything I'm showing that's written down here is what I would expect and what any other math teacher would expect to see in your solution. You can't just put numbers all over the place and just plop an answer somewhere. So they need to see this process. All right, now we're left with our last kind. Okay, this time it says determine the following. 70% of what number is 35? Notice the difference in the wording. This one is what is 115% of 60? This one is 70% of what number is 35? So some of the problem with mathematics has to do with the translation to English. So really what we're talking about, 70% is that 35. So those two match up to each other. Okay, so in a sense, now what we're finding is not the numerator, we're going to be finding the denominator. So we're going to set up the same way as we did before. So 70, that's going to be 70 over our 100. Okay, and remember is 35, so that means that that 35 needs to go on the top where the 70 is. And this is what I need to find, is the denominator. So this time what I'm finding is what do I multiply 70 by in order to get 35? Okay, again, if you're not sure, what you would do is you would go 35 divided by 70, and when I do 35 divided by 70, I get decimal 5. So that means that's what I've multiplied 70 by to get 35. So I must do the exact same thing on the bottom here. So x then is going to be 100 times the 0.5, and that's going to be 50. All right, so next one as far as translation. So 48% of what number is 120? So again, just like the last one, the 48% is 120. So if you notice in English, they separate what goes together. Now what we do, same kind of thing. 48 is the percent is the same as 48 over 100. The 48 and the 120 must match each other, so that means it has to be on the top, and I'm finding the denominator. So what do I multiply 48 by to get 120? Well, I'm not quite sure, so I think I'm going to go 120 divided by 48, and when I do that, I get 2 decimal 5. So that means I multiplied 48 times 2 decimal 5 to get 120. I must do the same thing down here. Okay, so when I do that, x is going to be 2.5 times the 100. So I end up with 250. Okay, so those are the 3 different types of questions that you need to be able to do. Again, some of it has to do with the translation with the English. So make sure that you recognize the setup of all 3 kinds, whether you're finding a percent, which is the easiest. You can just take the 2 numbers, divide and multiply by 100. If it is finding the numerator, okay, where it's not the percent, again, make sure you set it up in this fashion. And this one, as I said, often is the one that gives students difficulty because the is 35 is separated from this 70% with some other English words. Okay, so what you have to do is from your textbook, page 82, it says number 1222, which is not right, so I will write that down for you in the class.